Dwebble exists. That's the intro. Welcome back to PokePaint, everyone, the series where I draw Fakemon for my fan-made Pokemon region, Fore. Last time I began to develop this region's version of the wild area, the open sea area, a sort of free roam zone with access to many towns, islands, and oceanic landmarks. In that episode, I made some Pokemon that might be found in the ocean, and said that this time I will be making the island-dwelling Pokemon. And although that's true, I ended up having to split this episode up into two parts, purely to save time. So this episode, if you couldn't tell, is all about Dwebble. When I was a kid, I really didn't understand the way that Pokemon were designed, so when I saw Dwebble and I saw that it wasn't part water type, I thought that that was absurd. I know, how can someone not like Dwebble? I was a monster. Nowadays, I have no problems with this design, and I actually think that this line is one of the way stronger concepts in all of modern Pokemon. That being said, a little while ago I had the idea to make multiple different variants of Dwebble when I saw some pictures of hermit crabs using things that weren't shells as shells. So today I'm going to make not one, not two, but three different versions of Dwebble and Crustle that will be able to be found in the different biomes of the open sea area, and by extension, the rest of Fore. Starting off with the first form that I made, I of course made a shell form. Instead of the normal rock bug, it would be water and bug, so that it just resembles a regular hermit crab. I did a second pass for this design because I wasn't super happy with the way the first one came out, so after a bit of reworking here, and also tracing, I don't have a problem with tracing, but I know a lot of people do, so I apologize if I offended any art purists out there. But I decided to trace some of these to save some time when I really wasn't feeling like putting a lot into it. Of course, all three of these different forms will have different shells to differentiate them, but I also wanted to change their body colors as well to get a more varied set. So here we have Dwebble, the hermit Pokemon, shell form. The Dwebble of Unova only use large rocks as their shells. However, in the tropics, without the presence of a large mountain range, the Dwebble here often have to be much less choosy with what they use as their homes. So many of them will search out discarded shells. This second form I got a little more creative with. When I initially had this idea, I knew that I was going to do a shell form, but had no idea what I was going to do for the other ones. So I did some digging for inspiration. And as it turns out, hermit crabs in desperate times will use all kinds of different things as shells, often human trash, and although this picture is pretty depressing, it gave me an idea for a pretty cute Dwebble design using a bean can as a shell. For a while this version was going to be a poison and bug type, that's why I used a green shade for the body, but I thought that was a little too sad, so when I went to do the evolution, I changed my mind and made it a steel bug type. This design, and also by extension its Crustle, came out really goofy, and I kinda love it. Dwebble, the hermit Pokemon, trash form. The Dwebble that are found in the busy city harbors often have a really tough time finding shells to use, and it will resort to any kind of garbage that can be found around the docks and beaches. This third version of Dwebble is loosely based on its beta design that was apparently supposed to be a fire and bug type, and it was going to use fired pottery as its shell. I had an idea to take it a step further. I wasn't going to use pottery, but I had the idea of making its shell cooling volcanic glass. I don't really know how I came up with that idea, and I can't really say why, but it's my favorite of the three designs. Dwebble, the hermit Pokemon, magma form. Some Dwebbles that live deep inside caves will use cooling volcanic glass as a shell. This not only gives them a defensive home, like most other Dwebble, but also gives them a fiery offensive advantage. I came up with more ideas, but these three were the coolest designs. Designing alternative Crustle designs posed a bit more of a challenge than it did to make the Dwebble designs, as Crustle's body is surprisingly nonsensical if you draw it without its shell. It kind of makes no sense. So I had to tweak some parts to make them work. The shell form of Dwebble would evolve into this version of Crustle. Instead of drawing a bigger shell and calling it a day, I settled on the idea of it having a coral chunk on its back, and I just immediately thought of little fish living on its shell, and I loved that idea. Crustle, the hermit Pokemon in the evolved form of Dwebble, coral form. These Crustles spend most of their time in the warm waters of the shallows. When their old shells get too small, they seek out a new home. This often means using large coral slabs as a safe home. Small schools of Wishy-Washy will often follow these Pokemon around, as they feel safe among the coral polyps. Making an evolution for the bean can form was surprisingly easy. Since Crustle needs a lot more space than Dwebble, it was a pretty easy next step to have it hide under a trash can, like Oscar the Grouch, which was a really funny idea to me. I was going to redo this one because I got the face completely wrong, but when I showed a friend the design, she told me that I definitely shouldn't change it, as she thought it was hilarious, so I guess we're keeping it. Crustle, the hermit Pokemon, the evolved form of Dwebble, trash form. These Dwebble often live in landfills and make their homes out of discarded trash. They hoard bits and bobs in their trash can, and older Crustle will often develop a monolith of trash on their back from their long lives of collecting. This last one is a form that I am absolutely in love with. I was actually able to use the true Crustle's full shape with this one, as I had an idea of using a section of Earth's mantle instead of its crust as its shell. I don't really know how I came up with that idea either, but like its pre-evolution, it's one of my absolute favorites that I've done so far. Crustle, the hermit Pokemon in the evolved form of Dwebble, magma form. This is what occurs when a Crustle spends most of its life buried in the deepest parts of the Earth's crust. They can only be found deep in caves and by volcanoes, as these are their only outlets to safely come to the surface. Alright, well, these are our 6 Pokemon that we've added to the Pokedex today. Yeah, this was a bit of a lighter episode, and also a bit of a jokier episode too, as I didn't really take these designs super seriously. But I think because of that, they came out well. I promise that we'll wrap up the other island-based Pokemon designs in our next episode. As always, here's my updated team, and feel free to show yours in the comments below, because I really do love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this episode and you want to see more like it, then subscribe, and turn on the bell to get notified when I upload next.